If you woke up before your alarm this morning and couldn't get back to sleep, the explanation might be older than you think. Closer to 50,000 years older, to be specific. Neanderthal DNA is sitting inside modern human bodies right now, and researchers have found that the variants tied to circadian rhythm regulation consistently nudge people toward waking earlier. That's a real published finding across hundreds of thousands of people. Here's the quick version of how this happened. Tens of thousands of years ago, as modern humans migrated out of Africa and into unfamiliar territories, they encountered Neanderthals, a now extinct group of ancient humans who had been living in Eurasia. And they didn't just coexist, they had children together. Genetic evidence points to a window of interbreeding that opened around 50,000 years ago and stayed open for roughly 7,000 years. That window is where everything in this video comes from. The result? The gene flow between Neanderthals and modern humans resulted in most non-Africans carrying 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. That sounds small, but 1 to 2% of 3 billion base pairs is an enormous amount of genetic material. And here's the thing that most people miss. Nobody has the same 1 to 2%. It's scattered differently across every person's genome. Researchers estimate that at least 20% of the total Neanderthal genome has been recovered by piecing together fragments from living people today. Before we get into what that DNA is doing, there's one thing worth keeping in your head for the rest of this video. A lot of Neanderthal gene causes X headlines don't hold up. One team went looking for exactly this. They took more than 235,000 Neanderthal variants, ran them against 96 traits and around 300,000 people of non-African ancestry, and then filtered hard for the ones where the Neanderthal DNA was doing the work, rather than a modern human gene sitting next to it. Out of 235,000, about 4,300 survived that filter spread across 47 traits, so the real ones are real. There just aren't as many as the headlines suggest. Let's start with the alarm clock. Research published in Genome Biology and Evolution found that Neanderthal DNA fragments are enriched for effects on circadian gene regulation, the system that controls your internal body clock, and consistently associate with a tendency toward morningness in modern Europeans. The logic behind it is actually elegant. Neanderthals had been living at higher latitudes for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans arrived. At higher latitudes, the length of daylight changes dramatically across seasons. A body clock that runs slightly faster can anticipate those changing light levels more easily, which makes you more likely to wake up early and stay in sync with the season. They'd already adapted to that environment. When modern humans arrived and interbred with them, some of those clock variants came along for the ride. Neanderthal DNA may nudge the clock slightly, and at a population level, that nudge is statistically visible. If you wake up early, there are 100 explanations. This is one possible contributor, and a small one. Start with your hands. There's a hand condition that up to 30% of older Northern European men develop, and for a long time nobody could fully explain why. Up to 30% of men in Northern Europe over 60 suffer from a condition called Dupuytren's contracture. The condition is sometimes called the Viking disease because it mainly affects individuals with Northern European ancestry. It hits men far more than women, and it starts small, a lump in the palm. Over time, it pulls one or more fingers down until they won't straighten. Researchers at the Karolinska Institutet decided to investigate why this condition almost never appears in people of African descent. Their thinking was straightforward. If it's rare in Africans, and Africans have very little Neanderthal DNA, maybe the Neanderthal connection is worth looking at. The researchers used data from 3 large clinical cohorts in the US, the UK, and Finland, comparing the genomes of 7,871 sufferers and 645,880 healthy controls. They identified 61 genetic risk factors for the condition and found that 3 of these were inherited from Neanderthals, including the second and third most important risk factors. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The Viking disease name is almost certainly wrong. Earlier physicians theorized this geographic prevalence was the result of Viking populations in Northern Europe, but the medical community eventually identified the disease in regions Vikings likely spent little time in, such as South Asia, and concluded its origin must be somewhere else. And there's a cave painting in Chauvet, France, dating back around 30,000 years that appears to show a handprint resembling one of these contractures. If that interpretation is correct, the condition existed tens of thousands of years before the Viking Age. As lead researcher Hugo Zeberg put it, the roots of this disease lie in very ancient human history, and the connection to Vikings has probably been overstated. So the next time someone calls it Viking disease, you can tell them it's actually much, much older than that. Quick one. If you're watching this and you've got the hand thing, I want to hear about it in the comments. Now here's something you can actually check right now. Look at your nose. Specifically the height of it, top to bottom, from the bridge down to the base. Researchers found that in a genome region called ATF3, many people with Native American ancestry, and in a second group of participants, people with East Asian ancestry, carry material inherited from Neanderthals that contributes to increased nasal height. The region shows signs of natural selection, which means it wasn't random. It was kept because it helped. The reasoning makes sense too. Noses help regulate the temperature and humidity of inhaled air, so different shapes suit different climates. As populations moved out of Africa into colder environments, a nose that could better warm and humidify cold air was a real advantage. Neanderthals had been living at higher latitudes for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans arrived. They'd already solved that problem, and we borrowed the solution. Be exact about what this study found, though. It's nasal height specifically, top to bottom. Not width. Not general nose shape. One specific dimension, in populations with Native American and East Asian ancestry. If you're going to share this one, share it right. We're halfway through, and I want to tell you now that the last one on this list is the one that surprised me most. Hold on for it. 1 in 3 women in Europe inherited the receptor for progesterone from Neanderthals, a gene variant associated with increased fertility, fewer bleedings during early pregnancy, and fewer miscarriages. That's not a small, obscure finding. Analyses of biobank data from more than 450,000 participants, among them 244,000 women, show that almost 1 in 3 women in Europe have inherited the progesterone receptor from Neanderthals. 29% carry 1 copy of the Neanderthal receptor, and 3% have 2 copies. What makes this one stand out from everything else on this list is the frequency. The proportion of women who inherited this gene is about 10 times greater than for most Neanderthal gene variants, according to researcher Hugo Seeberg. When something is 10 times more common than expected, that's usually a sign natural selection kept it around because it was working. The mechanism looks like this. Carriers make more progesterone receptors in their cells, which appears to make them more sensitive to the hormone, and that may be what's protecting against early bleeding and miscarriage. Now, there's a complication here worth being honest about. In 2018, scientists discovered a high frequency of Neanderthal progesterone receptor alleles in modern human populations, and this was linked to a higher risk of preterm birth. Some researchers took that as a sign natural selection on this gene was weak enough that harmful mutations built up alongside the useful ones. But the two findings haven't been reconciled. Same gene, 2 studies, results pointing opposite directions, and nobody has resolved it yet. Now let's talk about your brain. Not in a dramatic way. This one is subtle, but it's real. Researchers CT scanned 7 Neanderthal brain cases and 19 modern human brain cases to build a measurement they called a globularity index. Basically, how round the brain case is. Then they applied that measurement to MRI scans of about 4,500 living people and cross-referenced it with their Neanderthal DNA data. What they found is that Neanderthal alleles on 2 specific chromosomes are associated with a slightly less round, more elongated brain case, and they traced this to genes involved in how neurons develop and how nerve fibers get insulated. The effects were described by the researchers themselves as subtle but detectable because of the large sample size. This is not you have a Neanderthal skull. It's a small shift in brain shape that shows up statistically across thousands of people. The fact that it's detectable at all is what makes it interesting. And now the thing I said I'd come back to. The one almost nobody talks about. No living human carries any part of the Neanderthal Y chromosome, and no living human carries any Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA either. Those are the 2 lineages that pass directly from parent to child. The Y from father to son, the mitochondria from mother to all children. Both of them are completely absent. Zero trace in every modern human population ever studied. Think about what that means. We have Neanderthal DNA in our noses, our hands, our brains, our fertility genes, our body clocks. But the two most direct genetic lineages, the ones that would have carried the clearest Neanderthal identity forward, are gone. Completely. Researchers have proposed a few explanations. Maybe the Neanderthal Y chromosome simply accumulated too many harmful mutations in a small population and was outcompeted over generations. Maybe the mitochondria were just lost to chance over thousands of years. There's even a hypothesis that the Neanderthal Y was incompatible enough with modern human biology that male hybrids had reduced fertility, so those lineages quietly disappeared while everything else got through. None of these explanations are confirmed. The absence is real. The reason for it is still an open question. So here's where we actually are. You're carrying DNA from a species that went extinct roughly 40,000 years ago. Genetic evidence points to a window of interbreeding that opened around 50,000 years ago and stayed open for roughly 7,000 years. And what came out of that contact is still physically present in your body. It's in what time your alarm feels unnecessary. It's in the hands of millions of older men in Northern Europe. It's in the height of some people's noses. It's in the fertility biology of 1 in 3 European women. It's in the shape of people's brain cases. The Neanderthal story used to be about extinction, a species that lost. But the genetics tell a different story, one where they didn't disappear cleanly, they dissolved into us. At least a fifth of their genome survived, and possibly closer to half. We just carry it now, scattered across billions of people, doing quiet work in bodies they never got to see. And I want to know which one of these you've got. Wake up before your alarm? Nose you've never liked? Tell me in the comments which one hit. I read all of them, and they shape what I cover next. If this video taught you a lot, subscribe to see when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching the Fossil Archives.